this is April with Made in the Shed Quilts. I'm back with another new quilt pattern and a few new tips to help you level up your quilting. So this here is my Marked with a Heart quilt pattern. It uses a lot of snowballed corners, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. You may be thinking, snowballed corners, I've done that a million times. I already know how to do that. I already know all the tips and tricks. But if you're newer to quilting, you've never heard the term snowballed corners before, you're not sure what that's all about, or if you're just sick of wonky corners and want some tips to fix that, stay tuned. First, I'm going to walk you through the normal way to do snowballed corners, the way every tutorial is going to tell you how to do it. And then I'm going to walk you through my 3 tips to do them a little bit faster and get them a little bit cleaner. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing that a pattern is usually going to tell you what to do is to mark a diagonal line on your square, on your little square that's going to be the corner. So I've got my friction pen here. I'm just going to mark a line right on the diagonal. I'm going to do the other one because we're going to do 2 corners so we can make a cute heart. I'm going to do that right on that diagonal. Okay, so now we're going to take this to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch this onto our bigger square. All right, so the next thing that a pattern is going to tell you to do usually when you're snowballing corners is they're going to tell you to sew right through that line, right through that diagonal line. So here we go. Okay, and then I'll do my other corner. This is just my little leader piece. It helps when you're starting to sew on an edge. You don't really want the thread to get sucked in. So I use the leader piece to keep that from happening. Okay, and I'll sew right through that line. Show you what to do next. Okay, and the next thing that you usually do after you sew down those corners is, I bet you can guess it, you usually trim those corners. So let's do that. I'm going to just line up my 1/4 inch line with the seam, slice through that corner, and I've got a seam allowance right there. And then you would usually press those corners out. So let's see what happens. Okay. Let me flatten that a little bit more. Okay, so we've got some snowballed corners. Those are pretty good, right? But let's go ahead and measure this and see what happens. We started with a 4.5 inch square, so this should end up being 4.5 inches, but let's see. So I'm lining up these 2 corners those look good, but you can see here, oh, can you? Let's see. You can see here, look, there's a gap there. You ended up a little bit short. And that's because you sewed right on that diagonal line. And what happens is you lose a little bit of the fabric when you fold it over, and from the width of the thread and everything. It's a little bit short right there too. So, so let me dive into my 3 tips that I have to show you. So let's go back over to the sewing machine and I'll tell you how to make these a little bit better. Okay, so my first tip, and this is gonna keep you from having to mark all of those lines. In my marked with a heart pattern, there's something like, oh gosh, almost 400 little tiny snowballed corners, and you don't really want to be marking that many tiny squares. So here's my big tip for that. This is a special washi tape. This is called diagonal seam tape. It's made by Cluck Cluck Sew. And you just line this up with your needle, and then you can follow this red line with your corners to keep it lined up, and then you don't have to mark your squares. So I'm gonna just, let's see if I can do this. You're gonna line this up right with the needle hole. Okay, that's pretty good. And then I'm just gonna run this all down the whole length of my extension table. And then we don't want to cover up the presser feet, so I'm just gonna cut it right there. But that'll show me exactly where that line is. And you don't have to use this special tape. You can use regular washi tape, or even just painter's tape, and just line up where the needle is with the edge of the tape. And we've got our squares that I have not marked. Oh, and here's my second tip, okay? The second tip is don't sew exactly on the diagonal. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. And let me see if I can bring you a little bit closer. Okay. So when you're lining it up, don't line up the corners exactly. You want to kind of put your corner to the left of the needle just a little bit. And you want your corner over here to be just to the left of that line, just lined up right with the left edge of that red line. And sew that. Okay. And then we'll do our next corner. Again, I'm just sewing just to the right of where the actual diagonal is. Okay, so those are the first 2 tips. Let me take you over to my pressing table and show you my 3rd tip. Okay, Okay, tip number 3, and this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but tip number 3 is to press before you trim these corners. So let's do that, because what you want is for when you fold it over, you want your corners to line up, right? You want to know exactly where that corner is originally when you're pressing. So I'm going to set my seams like I always do. I'm going to, rather than just, you know, running over this with the iron, I'm going to really carefully finger press, and I'm going to make that corner line up exactly with the other corner of the square. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now I'm going to, as I always do, I like to spray with a little bit of water. Press it again with my iron. Put my clapper on top of it to get those seams nice and flat. Okay, and then bring in my little cutting mat. This is where it's a little bit risky doing this, but might be worth it. You want to make sure you fold back that corner again before you trim the seam. You don't want to cut it off. Okay. Other side, fold that back. Trim that corner off. Now let's see. You know how we measured it before to see if it was exactly 4.5 inches? Let's see if it is this time. Let's get you a little bit closer. Okay, look at that. It's exactly 4.5 inches. And you know what? I even have a little bit I can trim off right there. I'm gonna trim just the teensiest bit right there. It's always better to have too much than not enough, because then you can always trim it off. But if you're a little bit short, then things can get tricky. But yeah, see, I've got a little bit hanging off right there that I can trim off. But look. We've got perfect snowballed corners. And then we can make those super cute hearts for the Marked with a Heart quilt. All right, so I'll link my quilt pattern down below if you're interested. But I hope these tips helped. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and I'll try to get back to you. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.